It's Christmas Eve in the year 2022, and Dan, a former sergeant who is now a teacher, is supposed to help out with his wife Amy and daughter Maury. Instead, he tries over the phone to apply for his dream job in a lab, but unfortunately, his application is rejected. After throwing a frustrated tantrum outside, Dan joins his daughter on the couch and reminds her to do what no one else is willing to do. The family then watches an important soccer game, but the game is suddenly interrupted when a glowing cloud of smoke and electricity appears in the stadium, and people start to walk out of it. These people look like soldiers and are led by Lieutenant Hart, who tells everyone that they come from the year 2051. An alien species known as white nails invaded the Earth, and most of the humans were wiped out. So these soldiers are here to ask people to travel with them to the future and help them fight the war. As the months pass, countries around the world send in as many soldiers as they can, but it never seems to be enough. The future keeps asking for more people, and only a quarter of those who go return. When they run out of trained soldiers, the government begins recruiting civilians to join the fight. This causes riots in the streets because many people think that they should not be sent to a war that does not affect them. Dan continues to work as a teacher, but his students don't seem very interested in what he has to teach because they don't see the point if they're going to die anyway. The only exception is Martin, who is obsessed with volcanoes and always wants to talk about them all the time. At that moment, Dan receives an important message on his phone. He has been recruited. Dan goes to the military facility and undergoes some tests confirming that he will be able to join the fight because he will die in 7 years. Suddenly, Dan feels a painful sensation in his arm and discovers that they have placed a metal device on his arm. He stated that the device would track him in the future. After 7 days of roaming, the device will bring it back. Then, Dan goes to tell Amy the news, and she immediately decides that they must run away. Dan points out that he can't get rid of the government tracker, so Amy begs him to talk to his father, whom Dan hasn't seen since he was abandoned as a child. Away from pride, for the sake of his family, Dan goes to see his father James to ask for his help. But James believes Dan has been sent by the government to spy on him, and an argument ensues. In the end, Dan has to leave with the device still strapped to his arm. He returns home to tell his family the bad news, but also promises to return. The next day, Dan goes to the training facility, where he befriends a scientist named Charlie and a fighter named Dorian, who will return in his third draft. They receive basic training, including shooting and first aid, before being given a full explanation of how time travel technology works. Time-link is like 2 rafts on a moving river, and the river can only move between these 2 points. That's why they can only travel between 2022 and 2051. These are the fixed points, and they can't choose something before the war. Later, the cadets were resting in the barracks when the alarm suddenly sounded. It was time to leave. The trainees are confused because they were supposed to have 7 days of training, but are told that the future can't choose when they need help. Once everyone is together, the time link is activated, and a cloud like the one that appeared during the soccer match begins absorbing them into the future. They are supposed to go to Miami Beach, but in the control room, something goes wrong with the output coordinates. The group appears in the sky just above the city and falls on top of a building, causing several of them to die instantly. The remaining members manage to save themselves when they fall into a pond, and they just have to swim. The team looks to the city of Miami only to find it in complete ruin. They don't know how to advance, but at that moment, a colonel calls them, telling them that the city has been overrun by the White Stairs, so the soldiers are coming to bomb the whole place. The team's mission is to rescue a research team trapped inside a laboratory. The colonel knows Dan has experience in the military and puts him in charge of the team. Dan guides the team around town, giving them pointers on how to move about properly and finding death and destruction everywhere they go. They find the lab building, and when they enter it, they discover a dead alien, so Dorian takes a claw as a trophy. Furthermore, they find the search party, but they all died as part of an alien trap. The colonel tells them to get all the copies back and hurry up, because if there are dead bodies around, the White Steps will come back, and the jet fighters will close. The team rushes to pick up all the necessary items, then begin to make their way downstairs as quietly as possible. However, one of the players hears a noise, and when they look up, they finally discover what the white spikes look like. The alien shoots out of its tentacles, killing one of them, and the team immediately opens fire. Their bullets don't seem to damage the alien's thick skin, but at least it looks like they can slow them down when they go down the stairs and find an exit passage. The aliens kill and capture several team members on the way, so Dan stays to defend them. Since his bullets won't work, he attacks with a fire axe, which which isn't that effective either. Fortunately, Dorian came to the creature's rescue and killed the creature by teaching the team that its only weak points are its neck and abdomen. With plenty of white bikes chasing after them, the team runs through the streets until they find the tank coming to their rescue. Unfortunately, the white spikes reach the tank first and destroy it. Now, the team has no choice but to fight off the aliens while simultaneously trying to find cover. As more and more of the team fall into the alien attack, the survivors fall inside a tunnel and Dan stops to save a fallen intern. This delays the entire team, and 2 of the trainees decide to stay behind and act as a shield against the aliens until the rest of the team can escape. At that moment, the planes finally arrived and bombed the entire area. Hours later, Dan and Charlie wake up at a forward operating base in the Dominican Republic. They find Dorian, who tells them that the rest of the team is dead, and berates Dan for stopping to help a fallen person in case everyone else is in danger. Dorian admits that he is suffering from cancer, and he has learned that he is the one who decides when he will die. Their conversation is interrupted when Dan is asked to meet the colonel. When he hears another soldier refer to her by her nickname, Dan is shocked to realize that this is the older Maury. She grew up to be a scientist and is the principal researcher of the R-Force, which she created herself. Maury explains that she hasn't brought Dan to see her father again, and that she actually needs his help with something. In fact, she acts all cool and professional around him. She then proceeds to show him a recording of a different-looking white bicycle. All the foreigners who fought in the city were male, and this one is female. It is more aggressive and rare, and it also nests underground. White males will die defending her because it seems all they care about is the survival of their species. The bombs used by the military contain a toxin made by Maury, and so far it has been killing male white spikes without problems. However, the alien female survived this toxin, so Maury needs Dan to join the extraction team and capture a white female to study her. We hope they can develop a stronger poison that will kill the main source of alien reproduction. The team prepares and leaves in helicopters, where Maury tells Dan the story of what happened. Aliens appeared out of nowhere in Russia in 2048, somehow avoiding all satellite and radar imagery. It only took them 3 years to take over the world, and they don't care about material things. They only want humans as food. Dan wants to know what happened to him before he died, but Maury thinks it's best not to go that route. Moments later, they reach the nest, where they find a group of soldiers trying to tie down the white female bike. The alien is enraged and starts attacking the soldiers, killing many of them. Maury joins them and puts a clean shot into her neck, giving the others a chance to put more rope around her and stop her from leaving. After being captured, the female alien cried out for her protectors, and soon the area was filled with aliens. As the female attempts to attack Maury, Dan descends and shoots as many of the aliens as he can before joining the others in the nest to help save his daughter. Together, the soldiers push the female into the cage and a helicopter, but now the males try to attack the helicopters as well to save her. Even in one accident, Dan and Maury run to a jeep and start shooting at the aliens to give the choppers a chance to escape with the cage. After that, the 2 of them took off very quickly to escape from the area. They stop at the beach to put in a distress fire, and Maury berates Dan for acting without thinking. Dan just wants to protect her, but Maury doesn't believe him and explains that he left the family when he was 12 because depression over not knowing what he wanted making him too hard. When she was 16 years old, Dan got into a car accident, and Maury was in the hospital when he died. Maury is hurt by all of this, and Dan has no words because he can't believe he's become like his father. Suddenly, he realizes he might understand James when he says the war has left him in a dark place mentally. The female white bike is transported to a fortified offshore oil platform where the time machine is kept. She is chained and given a large amount of painkillers every hour. Together, Dan and Maury analyze the alien's DNA and try to figure out how to stop the poison from killing it. It takes a lot of work for several days, but it also allows them to bond again and chat in a more friendly way as they share meals. The night before Dan leaves, he tells Maury that he is proud of her and that her mother would have been proud of her too. Dan tries to tell Maury that she needs to rest and to give him more work because he's supposed to be here to help after all. Maury takes the opportunity to finally explain why she bought it here. Once she finds a way to make a stronger poison, he must send it back to the past to mass produce it and have it ready when the aliens arrive. This is why you work like crazy until the night is over, and you have to do it before he leaves. Dan does not want to leave Maury behind to her death, but Maury points out that she called him because she is the only one she can trust. At that moment, the machine finally ends venom with a 100% match with the female white spike. But it's also the moment the alien awakens and asks for her protection. As a group of male aliens arrive to attack the platform, Dan thinks they must kill the female to stop the attack. But Maury points out that they only have one sample of the poison, and it could help them more in the past. When the soldiers begin to defend the platform as best they can, and several aliens crash into the labs, Maury and Dan run around the platform to try to get to the airstrip where Dan should be in the time jump, which will happen in a few minutes. The two shoot a lot of aliens in the way, yet Maury still gets hit by a sudden spike. Dan tries to help her walk, but she is in so much pain, and the platform is about to collapse because the aliens have crashed a ship against her. Maury apologizes to Dan for being cold, and after saying she loves him, gives him the poison, urging him to return it to save everyone. Suddenly an alien appears and drags Maury with it, causing Dan to jump in after her to save her. But this is the moment when the time machine activates, and the time link sends Dan, Dorian, and Charlie and the others back to the past. Fortunately, the poison is safe in Dan's hands, and the vial does not break. Charlie is fine, but admits he kept hiding like a coward. Dan tells Hart that they need to mass-produce the poison and send it into the future to kill all the aliens. But Hart has bad news. The time machine no longer works, possibly because the aliens on the oil rig destroyed the other. Its end. They can't go back again, which means it's over. Dan returns home and can hardly believe he's ever going to be back in his family again, still in shock over everything he's been through. At night, he cannot sleep, and keeps visiting Maury to confirm that she is alive. When Amy checks on him, Dan shares what happened with the much older Maury, still determined to find a solution to all of this. Amy helps him see the facts they have. They know aliens are attacking Russia in 2048, but no one sees the ships arriving. That might have been the year they started moving, but they've arrived before, and no one notices because it's in the middle of nowhere in Russia, so they need to start looking years earlier than that. The next day, Dan immediately commutes to work. He visits Dorian and convinces him it's not over. Then they take Dorian's cup claw to the lab where Charlie works. Charlie confirms that there is a deposit on the paw that looks like volcanic ash that came from China or Korea. They don't understand how Asian ash could end up in Russia, which means they need to ask a volcano expert. After that, Dan goes to see his student Martin, who explains that there was a huge volcanic eruption in Asia thousands of years ago. If the ash were blown away by the wind, it could get stuck in Russian waters, which eventually turned into ice. This means that the creatures have always been here on Earth, frozen under hundreds of layers of ice, which is why they never saw the ships arrive. The reason they wake up in the year 2048 is when climate change finally finishes melting all of the polar ice. They take this theory to the government, but since they don't have any proof, they are not given the resources to find the alien nest. They need to do it the illegal way, and Dan knows just the right person. His dad, James, who's been living off the grid for years and has his own private jet. Hearing Dan say, "I need your help," convinces James to help with the mission, no matter how crazy that sounds. Dan also reaches out to Hart, who has worked with Maury in the future and is ready to finish the job for her beloved leader. Hart brings a few soldiers with her, as well as plenty of weapons and some copies of venom. The team travels to Russia, and this time Charlie promises he won't go into hiding. When they got to the Academy of Glacier Sciences, they started looking around the area for signs of anything strange. They stop when they discover that their devices are going crazy because there is a strange magnetic field surrounding them. Using a lot of explosives, the team opens a hole in the ground and enters an ancient cave, where they finally find the frozen spacecraft. Dan points out that entering the ship is too dangerous, and they can go tell the government they've found a clue. But everyone agrees the government wasn't working, and it's up to them to make things right. They use a chainsaw to cut through the ice, and the team enters the ship while leaving Charlie and James outside in case something tries to escape. The group reaches the cockpit and realizes this is a crash site, and the aliens never intended Earth to be their destination. Surprisingly, the pilot's body is not a white spike. They go to another room and find actual white spikes inside a series of biopods, which makes them realize that they are payload. They are bioengineered creatures that the pilot's alien race has used as weapons to colonize other planets. The team begins by injecting the pods with poison and watching the white struts writhing in pain, confirming that the poison is killing them. However, their cries also awaken the aliens who have not yet been injected, causing them to break their horns and attack. The team shoots as many as they can, but some manage to escape. Dorian points out that they have no choice but to blow up the ship, so Dan gives his paw and accepts to stay behind to activate the bomb once everyone is out. James begins shooting at the fleeing aliens, but Charlie's weapon gets stuck, and he starts killing the creatures with a chainsaw. Dan emerges and warns them to escape, while a massive alien colony is overrun by Hart and the others. Unable to wait any longer, Dorian makes the bomb explode, causing every creature to fall with him and die on his own terms as he wants. Dan, Charlie, and James make it out of the cave before the explosion hits them, but James explains that he saw a red-bellied alien running away. Dan realizes this is the female, so they split up to go after her. The Queen finds one and attacks, but it turns out to be a snowman covered in clothes that James has set as a trap. When the Queen catches up with him instead, Dan shows up to hit her with his snowmobile. Then father and son shoot together until they push the Queen off the edge of the cliff. They know she is not dead yet and have prepared for her return. When the Queen attacks again, she goads them into separating them, then impales a spike on Dan before going after him. Dan uses the same spike to stab her mouth, and James takes the opportunity to hit her with an axe, leaving her blind. The Queen begins beating in desperation, and Dan takes the opportunity to inject poison into her leg. But the Queen removes her leg so that the poison does not spread through her body. When the Queen tries to chase Dan down, he rigs a grenade to take her down with him, but at that moment, James raised his injured hand to make the alien smell his blood and go after him instead. Dan refuses to lose his father after their reunion, so he jumps on the Queen and slashes her throat with Dorian's claw. After hitting her several times, he pulled out the last vial of poison and stuffed it into her mouth before kicking her off the cliff again. The Queen hits a big rock and eventually dies. The next day, news broadcasts around the world report an explosion in Russia that kills a group of aliens, and the government tries to take credit for it. Dan returns home and meets his family, and James is finally allowed to meet his granddaughter. Now they can work together for a better future. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to Quick Recaps for more videos like this to help the channel grow.